So, one thing in Mechwarrior 4 that isn't exactly clearly defined is, what the bloody hell do the pilot stats actually mean for your lance mates? This is something I've never actually been concerned about personally. I just pick pilots based on their voice work, which is why I grab, Beowulf, Claymore, and Blackjack, and why I avoid those other guys. But it's part of the game, and then, a couple of you guys have asked, what is up with the pilot stats. So here's what I managed to find. First of all, there's 4 stats. There's gunnery, piloting, blind fighting, and sensors. Now, gunnery and piloting is pretty obvious. Gunnery is just how accurately they can get shots on target. Piloting is about how they're able to position their mech, generally. And I think it might also affect, if they get knocked down by heavy fire, how quickly they get back up. At least that's how it worked in Mech Commander, I do remember. Sensors is a bit of a weird one because of the fact that, in Mechwarrior 4, all sensors have got, the standard range. Apparently it has to do with special equipment, but I really don't see how that works. At most, I think the biggest thing it might change would have to do with guided weapons, like LRMs. I can't really say this with any kind of authority, but I think if the better the sensors, the more likely they are to get a missile lock and be able to, get missiles on target that way. Blind fighting is another weird one. Apparently it has to do with them being able to engage targets while their sensors are being jammed. So that might have to do if the enemy uses either if they've got ECM or if they have the IFF jammer. It might allow them to actually engage those targets. I personally always thought it had to do with close-in fighting. So like if the enemy gets right in close in brawler range, the ability for them to actually position their mech so they can get a shot off, which was kind of what I was seeing when I was doing these experimentations, but that might have more to do with the gunnery and the piloting skill, like the piloting skill allowing them to be able to bring their guns to bear. So I actually did do some experimentation to test this, but the problem is the way it does it is it just expands all of the skills. So you can see a definite, I saw a definite difference between someone who has no skills and someone who has all the skills maxed, but then there was no real way to test what each skill could affect, unfortunately. Now, the way I did these experiments was pretty simple. I just went to skirmish, I sent it to combat waves, and then I set a mech on my side and a mech on their side. Both Centurions, so they're nice and balanced there. And then I just altered the experience of my pilot and the difficulty of the actual training waves, which just seems to do the same thing as setting the actual experience for the other side. So for your pilot, you get three levels. There's normal, which has no skills at all. There's elite, which has all skills maxed, and then there's veteran, which is a midway point. The enemy, on the other hand, they get 4 points of skill. So I'm fairly certain, recruit is the same as normal. Elite is the same as elite, which is handy. And then the other 2 are about midway point. It's a 4-point system as opposed to just a 3-point system. So I did that. I just put myself in some battle armor and stayed away from the fight, so I wouldn't interfere with it. Change any of the results. And the results were actually pretty consistent. I mean, when it was elite versus elite, they would wail on each other for a while until one got that little bit of an advantage, and then knocked them out. When it was normal on elite, the normal got thrashed very quickly. And then the same. So veteran on veteran. Generally, the AI tend to won veteran versus veteran because, like I said, 4-point system. I think their skills were set a little bit higher. And then when it was recruit on normal on recruit, that was 20 minutes of just pain. I mean, the first video here is this is the recruit normal versus a recruit, and generally what would happen is they would wail on each other for about 5 minutes, and they run out of ammo, and then they go at it with lasers, and it could take 20 minutes before someone finally knocked them down. So in this one, the one I actually recorded, I took enough video to show you what happens, and then decided to run in with the elemental, and as you can see, it does kind of affect the gunnery skills for the enemy are kind of apparent here because of the fact that I'm not dying. Generally, often, if the enemy won, then I would just charge in combat and I would die very, very quickly. But in this case, he had a tough time actually getting me on target, and if he got one good hit in, that's the battle armor gone. But no, actually, I managed to evade his fire and actually take him down with power armor, immediately assisted by another Centurion. So, so normal pilots and recruits, they can't hit for shit, and as a result they waste a lot of ammo and they just spend a long time shooting at nothing, basically. Now, the next stage after that is a normal versus a regular, so they actually have some skills in their skills. And this became a little bit more apparent about the difference between having some skill and having nothing. because the regular would often win hands down. You know, they're generally more accurate. They're able to get shots on target. Another thing you'll notice, this becomes a lot more apparent when you start getting to the elites, is and even in the single player, it's not so much that the enemy, when you set the difficulty levels, it's not that it changes the damages, it changes the armor. It doesn't do any of that. It doesn't trick around with any of the background things. All it changes is the pilot's skill. And this actually has a pretty big effect for a couple of reasons. The first one is that more shots are landing on target, which is generally, for you, that's generally a bad thing, because more shots on target means you take more damage. But the main thing is that they're more accurate. Now that is saying that more shots on target, but what I'm saying is the fact that they're able to get more shots on the same area of a target. They're able to pick, you know, if they start doing damage to a section, they're able to keep on hammering that section. That's why, you know, when you take center torso damage, you tend to go down pretty damn fast, because they're just able to concentrate fire and knock it all down. That's why high rank pilots are a lot more dangerous to be around. You know, if they get more shots on target but it's spread out over the area, then it doesn't really matter, because, you know, a lot of areas in orange, who cares? You haven't lost any weapons, you're not going down anytime soon. But if you concentrate on one area and you just have, like, you know, one section of the torso go red and then the black, you could lose some weapons, or you could even be outright destroyed eventually. So again, normal versus regular, the normal went down very fast. Because again, the normal was missing more of the time. And the times when he did hit, it wasn't all concentrated on the same area. Now there were a couple of times where during it a normal actually did win. Very, very, very rarely during the experimentations. That's, I think, mostly just from lucky shots, especially because the Centurion in Mercs, in the mech tech, comes with an AC-20. So, you know, if they manage to land a good shot with that, then that's going to knock things down pretty damn fast. Now, where the fights actually started to get interesting, as opposed to a pair of mechs derping against each other, even with the regular pilots, he got more shots on target, but it was still a lot of missed shots, a lot of time wasted just trying to get an angle, and it was, you know, I want those, you know, 20 minutes of my life back. Anyway, what started to get interesting was veteran versus veteran, and then elite versus elite. Now, veteran versus veteran, the enemy actually had a slight advantage, I believe, because, like I said, a 4-point scale as opposed to a 3-point scale, and this was a 3 versus a 2, or I don't know the best way to explain it. But the enemy veterans seemed to have a slight accuracy advantage, and for the most part, the AI would win those matches. For the most part, the veteran pilot on your side, he was still a good enough fighter to be able to get shots on target and be able to knock him down, just not as regularly as what the enemy did. So that was a lot more enjoyable to watch, honestly. And also the fact that running around in the power armor against an enemy veteran pilot. Again, the accuracy did show, because every single time I tried to go toe to toe with them, I would get hammered. Every single time, without fail, because they're more accurate, and the piloting skills, and I think blind fighting, again, I can't confirm this, means that they're able to actually line their mech up to get a shot on me, even as I'm trying to move around. Because honestly, power armor is kind of more mobile, but at the same time, it's a hell of a lot slower, so there's that. But the big one was elite versus elite, and this is where I started noticing something else with the differences in the skills. Elite versus elite was it was as balanced as you could possibly get it. They both had max stats and everything, so both of them would open up with the initial volleys. They do a little bit of damage to each other, and then after a little bit of time, one of them would start getting into the red from the repeated hits, at which point they would go down pretty damn fast. So that was very balanced fighting between elite and elite. But here's the thing that I kind of noticed. I noticed this more when I was doing experimentations with the more diverse gaps. Like I did actually try a normal versus an elite. That was over so fucking fast. But what would happen is, it's not just the gunnery. The gunnery skill doesn't just affect how accurate they are and how much they're on target. You know, sniping specific sections. It seemed to also affect their rate of fire. Again, I noticed this more when it was a pretty big gap, but it seemed like the elite pilots were able to actually keep up a higher rate of fire. This is especially apparent with the Centurions having pulse lasers. If they were just armed with heavy weapons, like there's the AC-20 LRMs, but a higher rate of fire with those isn't as noticeable really, because there's already that big gap. But with pulse lasers, they the normal ones would fire a couple of bursts and then they'd stop, and then they'd line up and fire another couple of bursts. The elites seem to just keep on hammering them, you know, as much as they could, I assume, while maintaining heat. And all these matches were on Alpine, so heat wasn't too much of an issue, I would assume. So there's that as well. So overall, I mean, you know, an elite pilot, you know, they're more accurate. They're able to pick out sections and hammer them while maintaining a generally higher rate of fire, you know, heat and weaponry cycle permitting. Overall, that means that, you know, a pilot with good gunnery skills is definitely going to have an advantage. The good piloting skills also did kind of show up because they're able to position themselves better. They were able to keep up that rate of fire because they're able to just keep pointed at the enemy. If they've got bad piloting skills, sometimes they get turned around and, you know, show their back to the enemy. Sensors, I have no idea. At most, I could say that the guys with the highest sensors were able to get LRMs to lock on faster and more consistently. But that just could be the gunnery skill. I really don't know. There's no way to test it, honestly. The same thing with blind fighting. I mean, yeah, it could be what I'm saying with the close combat thing, but at the same time, that could be a combination of gunnery and piloting. But again, the one thing it can confirm is, you know, the stuff I've said before, and also the fact that when you go up against a veteran or an elite in power armor, I died really, really fucking fast.
Take out the designated target.
So there you go. That's a somewhat scientific, but at the same time, there's a lot of variables that I just don't know. And I've tried researching on the internet, and that gave a couple of conflicting answers. Like I said, blind fighting could be close combat oriented, like, you know, gunnery becomes less of an issue and it becomes blind fighting that becomes a predominant skill, or it could be if they're jammed and they're trying to lock on to an enemy that their sensors can't actually detect. And then there's sensors, which, you know, I mean, in Mech Command it's easy. Sensors is about, you know, if a mech moves, how good are they at picking out an enemy. In this one, all sensors are a kilometer range anyway, so I really don't know, to be honest. So that's an overview of the piloting skills. And some videos showing you exactly what happens. If you want to try it yourself, again, it's just skirmish mode. Set up a pair of battle mechs that are the same, and then let them go at it. And you'll be able to get some consistent results. I should also mention that it doesn't let you pick an actual pilot, which is why it always seems to be Goblin. I think that's his voice. I'm not too sure. I think I might have also, at one point, I might have gone Falcon when I was experimenting with more mechs. So we will be seeing her later on. That's guaranteed. This whole discussion got started up because of the bondsman Falcon, who I said I wasn't going to use in my normal playthrough, but no, she's gonna show up at some point. So that was all about the pilots. Next episode will be Country Life from the Davion playthrough. So I'll see you guys around then.